The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is the biggest, newest, shiniest entry in the only video game series that nobody hates. Not every game in this series is a masterpiece, but enough of them are, and since recent years have seen beloved franchises like Metal Gear, Final Fantasy, and Silent Hill all careening off a crap mountain cliffside in a burning ball of blistering butt gas, Zelda is pretty much the only big-time franchise left with any genuine hyper-goodwill. Oh god, it's so hard, I hate it, I hate doing it, I hate it, it's a nightmare. This is a series with no one clear best. Everyone has a different favorite for different reasons. Here's a completely unnecessary top 10 list of mine that will no doubt raise more questions than answers. By the way, I didn't get any gameplay footage, so I just went on my own adventure. Fuck video games, they're all bad anyways, I need a breath of fresh air. Groovy! As I've gotten older, I've come to dread starting up big RPGs or open world games like this because my time on this earth grows far too short for the required investment. Zelda games in particular I associate with the worst trope in all of gaming, the incredibly boring 6-hour intro section. Miraculously, Nintendo finally made a Zelda game that doesn't do any of that bullshit. Following a tantalizing game of Bury the Master Sword with his freaky fellowship, Link awakens from a 100-year pussy coma, wanders drunkenly out of the Odin Sleep bathhouse with his magic iPad, and there you go, you're free to explore. No cutscenes, no tutorials, no bullshit. You're still confined to a beginner area, but even that's big enough and open enough that it doesn't feel like too much of a hassle. The map is almost as big as my ever-expanding dong, which is to say the size of the entire universe, man. You'll constantly find yourself getting sidetracked by some gorgeous vistas and intriguing formations in the distance, and then you can go there and it's pretty cool. It's a fun game. The comparative quick start and initial exploration is undeniably exhilarating. In fact, I dare say the first few hours of Breath of the Wild are every bit as breathtaking, jaw-dropping, and pussy-dampening as the hype machine has led you to believe. So, if you're a professional gaming journalist who only plays games for a few hours before reviewing them, you probably felt pretty confident giving this game a perfect score. But, if you happen to be of that dying breed of obsolete mules who actually finish games before reviewing them, then you might start to feel that perfect score in your head going down a couple notches for every increasingly tedious and exasperating session. To put it gently, this game is bogged down and crippled by irritants. Nothing so immediately glaring as to reveal itself at a casual glance, but it's the little things, ultimately adding up to an experience that's underwhelming at best and infuriating at worst. Let me count the ways. For starters, let's just gather up all the lazy Dark Souls comparisons and flush them down the toilet. I'm amazed at how many lazy gaming journalists and brain-dead reviewers have yet to grasp the following two concepts. 1, being difficult does not make a game like Dark Souls, and 2, dying a lot does not make a game difficult. I've seen people praising the game's relatively high difficulty curve, but I'm putting my foot down and telling you that's a load of crap, because the fact is Breath of the Wild's difficulty has far less to do with genuine challenge than it does with cheap, retarded bullshit. One thing you'll notice immediately, and never stop noticing, is that regardless of how many hearts you have, most enemies will cleave away more than half of them in a single hit. This is because the armor you're wearing sucks. Oh sure, you can upgrade your armor to be better, but it doesn't matter because of a little thing called weather damage. Every area in the game has its own climate, whether freezing cold, smoldering hot, or the actual flaming sphincter of Lucifer. This requires you to constantly switch to whatever armor set protects you from the surrounding weather, all of which have piss-poor defense compared to the basic blue tunic and pants in the cover. It's impossible to upgrade every piece of armor to a reasonable level without investing an asinine time sink into the depths of fetch questery. So even if you manage to upgrade 1 or 2 sets to their fullest, at some point you're always going to end up forced into wearing the flimsiest shit you have, resulting in you collapsing in a broken heap from any enemy that so much as tickles your balls too intensely. It's your choice. Either walk into every fight with glass bones and paper skin, or burst into flames every time you come within a 100-mile radius of Goron country. Oh, and by the way, sometimes you get struck by lightning, too. Have fun with that. Of all the miserable weather conditions in this game, none saps the fun out and replaces it with frothing animal rage quite like the constant rain. 90% of Link's movement in this game is done via climbing, which he can't do when it's raining. And it's always fucking raining. Even without the rain, climbing is a nightmare. Link scales walls like Fat Spider-Man took a 2-ton crap in his pants. The climbing is unbearably slow, even with the fast-climbing bandana, it's still unbearable, and often you'll find yourself tediously scaling a wall or cliffside for what feels like an eternity, only to get just a cunt hair away from the top before Link's stamina runs out and sends you tumbling down the aggro crag, breaking your ass on every jagged rock and cactus cock down Springfield Gorge. There's so much goddamned waiting in this game, it's infuriating. Going into a dungeon takes too long. Coming out of a dungeon takes too long. The load screens take too long. The cutscenes take too long. And when I say cutscenes, I'm not talking about story cutscenes. I'm talking about intrusive, repeating interruptions that happen over and over again every time you see a divine beast, go near a divine beast, activate a shrine, activate a tower, activate a fairy fountain, cook a meal, or God forbid, just be minding your own business doing anything at all when the blood moon rises and does nothing important whatsoever except respawning enemies. Does that really require a cutscene? Why does it happen every time? Why do the load times to skip a cutscene actually seem longer than just watching the cutscenes themselves? Why does the game incentivize cooking as the primary way to heal myself when every single dish I cook makes me stand around waiting for this stupid animation? I didn't even mention the weapons breaking yet. Many have complained about that, but I understand why the mechanic was implemented. Or at least I thought I did. I assumed that once I acquired the Master Sword, I would have the one weapon that didn't break. And if that were the case, I would have been fine with it. But lo and behold, even the Master Sword runs out of use at the same rate as every other weapon in the game, and has to be charged for hours before you can use it again. That pissed me off, especially considering you acquire the sword so late in the game. Come on, you bastards! I'm almost at Ganon. Can you just let me have this? Just this one thing! I'm not complaining about the other weapons breaking. All I'm asking is that the fucking Master Sword, the ultimate weapon of Hyrule, the sword of evil's bane that seals away the darkness and can only be wielded by the chosen hero, doesn't deplete its batteries every 5 swings like a fucking Game Gear. The weapon breaking didn't even bother me as much as it did some people, but what does bother me is the limited inventory space. Yes, you can increase it by finding Koroks, but trust me when I say no matter how much you increase it, it's never enough. If you thought Zelda sealing him away in a Saiyan healing pod for 100 years made Link's balls bluer than his royal tunic, that is nothing compared to the constant sinking feeling in your sapphire sack every time you open a treasure chest with a cool weapon inside, only to have it followed with, "Fuck you, your inventory is full," and then have to stand there like an indecisive jackass deliberating over what, if anything, is worth dropping to make room. The horses are bullshit and the dungeons are horse shit. There's only 4 actual dungeons, and while said dungeons being giant robot animals is a fun theme and concept, the execution is nevertheless homogenized and copy-pasted from the texture to the objective, right down to the bosses. And if you thought those were samey, it's nothing compared to the mind-numbing monotony that is the shrines. Fuck the shrines. Fuck all infinity quintillion of them. Fuck the identical challenges. Fuck the identical walls. Fuck the identical music. Fuck finding them. Fuck searching for them. And fuck whoever decided that nearly every optional side quest in the game be a thinly veiled bread trail to yet another of these identical igloos of subterranean suckitude. The horses control like hot garbage, and of course the final boss of the game takes place on horseback, so it's not something you can even avoid. At some point in the last few years, someone decided that horses in games should have personalities of their own like real horses, which basically translates to them handling like they have Down syndrome, never doing what you say, tripping over their own hooves, and getting stuck on everything. It's about as fun as a root canal. Think about the limitations of the N64 and how buttfuck retarded the controller was, and then realize that somehow Epona still handled better than the horses in Breath of the Wild 19 years later. So basically what I'm saying is this game is a masterpiece. A masterpiece of shit. The horses suck, the climbing sucks, swimming sucks, the shrine sucks, switching out armor sucks, everything takes too long. In fact, the only thing in this game that doesn't last an eternity is the stamina meter required to do all this shit, which runs out faster than my patience. It seems like everything in this game is designed to be as tedious and annoying as possible. Take those knob-sucking long-distance laser turrets littered all over the place. Massive range and devastating attacks would be bad enough, but God forbid you find yourself targeted by 2 of them at once, because then you'll most likely find yourself getting pinned to the ground and stun-locked to death by a ceaseless barrage from both sides. You don't even have time to get up from one attack before the other one knocks you right back on your ass. And good luck finding cover from both of them. They seem deliberately scattered in such a way that escaping one always leaves you wide open to the next. The game climaxes with Link storming the corrupted Hyrule Castle, set to a rousing and nostalgic arrangement that evokes classic Zelda tunes. This is obviously meant to be an epic and emotional moment, but it's ruined by how goddamned frustrating it is slipping down towers in the rain while suck-ass sentinels blast you in the ass with red-hot Donga-Deacon beams. All of these gameplay issues nag, but I could have forgiven all of them if it weren't for the biggest issue of all, the one thing that let me down the most in Breath of the Wild to the point where it amplified my frustration with everything else was the story, or rather, the lack thereof. I'm a scholarly sort of gamer. Every night I sit in my master library poring over dusty tomes of Dark Souls item descriptions by candlelight while listening to Metal Gear Solid codec conversations on vinyl. I'm also one of those long-suffering maniacs who actually cares about the Zelda timeline and keeps an eye out for intriguing bits of lore in these nonsensical fairy games. To me, the best kind of story a Zelda game can tell is one that feels captivating and complete on its own, while also providing certain links to the past. Subtle nods to previous games or story elements that build on prior events feel rewarding to good boys like myself who can't help but approach these retarded Nintendo games with a studious mind. The best example of what I'm talking about is probably Wind Waker. The story of Wind Waker is compelling from the beginning, but it really comes together when you travel beneath the waves to the old Hyrule and see with your own eyes what became of the world you once saved in Ocarina of Time before fighting the returning Ganondorf. You get to see for yourself what happens to the world when Link gets sidetracked and isn't around to save the day. Ganondorf works as a returning villain because you know this incarnation of Ganon, you know where he came from, what he's about, and what he can do. Meanwhile, in Breath of the Wild, you're told over and over again that Calamity Ganon has destroyed Hyrule, but aside from a messed up castle town, Hyrule looks completely fine. The whole selling point of this game is exploring a lush and beautiful world, which is completely at odds with the narrative. How am I supposed to care about returning Hyrule to its former glory when it already looks more vibrant and beautiful than anything I've ever seen? In hindsight, the solution to this is obvious. Instead of starting the game at the 100-year time skip and having me track down my old memories, the game should have started 100 years ago and used the time skip at the halfway point to show me the difference between a lush Hyrule and a ruined one. This worked great in Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time, so it could have worked here. One could call that derivative, but when you look at the story of Breath of the Wild, it really wouldn't have been. It actually could have been a really fresh take on the series to have Link spend the first half of the game traveling alongside the princess for once, only to have Link and Zelda ultimately fail in their quest and wake up 100 years later to a world far more visibly devastated. Hell, with Zelda alongside you, they could have even implemented co-op. Instead, what we're offered is the most tired storytelling crutch in the book, amnesia. Instead of experiencing this adventure for ourselves, we collect memories and watch it unfold via cutscenes. We learn about our old companions and how they fell on their quest 100 years ago, but it's hard to care about these people's deaths when they're already ghosts by the time we meet them. It would have been so much better to get to know these characters ourselves and then see them die. But instead, all that happens is you're told Ganon has destroyed everything, even though it looks fine, and then you go talk to some ghosts before going to fight him. That's it. There's some interesting character development with Zelda, but again, that's all told via disjointed flashbacks, and it's possible to get through the game without even finding those memories. The story in Breath of the Wild simply has no interest in being clever or going beyond the bare minimum. I kept waiting for some third act twist that never came. From the moment you start the game, you're immediately told everything, and it basically amounts to, Ganon is bad, go kill him. But Ganon himself isn't even interesting in this game. He's not even a character, really. Just a big, swirling, nebulous entity of evil. Characters all refer to him as Calamity Ganon, and regard him as more of a force of nature than an actual villain. So he's basically the smoke monster from Lost, except even Smokey eventually got more development. I remember Ocarina of Time giving us an actual origin story for Ganon. He wasn't the most three-dimensional antagonist, but at least he was a guy with motivations. He wanted power, so he schemed and plotted and conquered, and you got to see firsthand the destruction he wrought with that power. Twilight Princess and Wind Waker both give you these great sword fights with the guy, and in all of them he's an interesting foe with a personality. He's Ganon, he's the bad guy, and he's a huge dick. It's not Shakespeare, but it works. In this game, he isn't even a person. He doesn't talk, he doesn't even do anything. He's just standing there, menacingly, for the whole game. Then you shoot him with magic arrows and that's it. Even the other bosses in the game lack creativity. They're not their own things, they're all just different forms of Ganon. It's fucking lame. Breath of the Wild is 5 hours of magic and wonder, followed by 30 hours of monotony and frustration. Despite all the predictable knee-jerk praise it's garnered, ultimately I was disappointed, and I gotta give this one an underwhelming 6 out of 10. It isn't hard to see why people are so enamored with Breath of the Wild. In many ways, it's the Zelda game everyone's always wanted. Big, open, beautiful, it takes the series back to its roots while embracing the full scope of what can be done with modern hardware. On some level, Breath of the Wild is a good game, but everything in it sucks. The gameplay is deep, but the challenge is cheap. The plot's paper thin and the villain is weak. Zelda, however, got back that goes beat, but peeping that plot got me hot like a creep. It's a fact that I'm packing the deets when I speak, cause I beat my games while you geeks nap and you sleep, so get back, cause I rap like a dangerous freak, and I'm saving the dames from the beast of the week. Suck it, Bunny Hop. Yeah. Oh my god, you know, a fucking monster. What have we done? We look like idiots. Turn it off. Delete everything. Throw it away. Delete. Stop.